Hello everybody, I would like to talk to you about a story that we all know, but to look in detail about this story, to put it into what God may want us to be thinking about today. Now the story is from 1 Samuel 17, the one that we all have probably heard in Sunday school or not before, but it's a story of David and Goliath. All right, now Saul's king of Israel, and the Philistines are this other country, and they are the arch enemies of God's people. And now there have been battles, victories and losses and everything that have occurred up to this point, and now we find again that the Philistines and the armies of Israel have gathered on two mountains over a valley floor to face each other once again. So as we look there, they're in this valley in 1 Samuel 7, and Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Elah to set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side. Now, what happens in this one, which makes this story much more dramatic, is that there's a champion now for the Philistines. This giant, his name is Goliath. The man is 9.5 feet high. He wears a mail, the metal thing like you might see from a feudal knight wearing the metal armor that's mesh that goes over his body like a suit. His mail weighs over 120 pounds. He's got a spear, and the head of his spear is a piece of iron that weighs 14 pounds, almost as much as a bowling ball. That's the spear. And he's out there shouting at the armies of Israel, "Send down your champion. Let us fight to the death. If I win, you become our slaves. If you win, we become your slaves." And then he starts mocking God. He does this in the morning, and he does it in the evening. For 40 days, 80 times, this giant is decreeing, "Come on, send down your champion." All the people in Israel, including the king Saul, are freaked out and afraid. What are we going to do? Look at the size of this man. He's twice as big as a normal human being. And he's taunting us, and he's defying the armies. Now the story unfolds. Jesse is old. He's a Benjamite. He lives, not far from where this battle is taking place. He has a little boy named David, his 8th son. He's a teenager, just a shepherd boy. And Jesse calls David home from taking care of the sheep, and he says, "Here, take all this bread and all these provisions and everything, and I want you to go up to the camp where your older brothers are in the army of Israel and deliver this food to them, and there's some other provisions for the captain of the 1,000 men that they're in." So David does like his father says, and he arrives there in the morning, and curious boy walks to the edge of the battle and sees this Philistine taunting the army of Israel and defying God, cursing him, saying, your God's nothing. He's just taunting everything. Well, David's looking at everybody and going, and they're telling him, well, whoever can kill this champion, the king will probably give you one of his daughters for your wife and money and everything and position and authority. And he's going, why isn't somebody going down there? Well, his older brother finds out that his little brother, you have to understand that in these times, a male child needed to be at least 30 to be called a man. So David seems to be the afterthought. 7 much older brothers, 15 years or more older than him, if it looks correct for the history of the times. So his oldest brother finds him there saying, "Hey, who's going to go down there? You can't let this guy talk to God's people like that." He was going, listen, you little smart aleck. I mean, I'm paraphrasing the words, but he gets real angry, and he says, I know you. You're just full of evil. You just wanted to come out here to see a battle. And David looks at his older brother and goes, excuse me, why are you yelling at me? All I was doing was saying the words. That word there in Hebrew means history, a lot of things. I'm telling our story. All I was saying, have we forgotten who we are? Well, the rumor goes through the army about this young boy who's going, hey, where's a man among the group? Let's go do this. The king finds out about it and brings him to him. And Saul starts to interrogate this young shepherd boy. Why do you think that you can do something? And he goes, we're God's people. We're the army of Israel. We have a history. Besides the fact that when I'm shepherding my lambs, if a lion or a bear grabs one of the lambs, I go after it and wrestle it out of its mouth, and if it starts to attack me, I grab it by the beard and strike it down. The Lord has allowed me to kill a lion and a bear. This is just a man, not a wild animal. Saul says, okay, here's my armor, put it on. So they mount all the king's armor on this young boy. Yeah, obviously it doesn't fit. And he says, now go do what you said you're going to do. You're going to defend us in the name of God. And he goes, I've never tested this stuff. I don't know how to use these weapons. So he takes it off. And he goes out to fight Goliath. An amazing story. Now when he reaches out there, Goliath's down there taunting, and he descends the hill down into the valley and approaches the giant. When the giant finally sees that this is just a little shepherd boy, he's shouting out, what do you think, I'm a dog? He said, you know, the birds and everything are going to eat. All you people are going to be carrion for the wild birds and animals after this battle's over, you know, and then he curses God. David looks at him and says, you come at me with a spear and a sword, and I come at you in the name of the Lord God, the host of heaven. And today, he's going to deliver me to you to me, and I'm going to cut off your head, and you and your people are going to be what you decreed. You're going to be the carrion and the dead that the wild beasts and the birds are going to eat. And Goliath's looking at him, and he starts to walk towards David, but David runs towards this giant. All he had was a sling and a smooth stone. Put that stone in the sling and slung it, and it stuck into the forehead of the giant, and he fell forward on his face dead. And David walks up to his carcass, pulls his sword out of his sheath, and cuts off his head. Now in the next video, I'm going to tell you why I think that story is so pertinent to us today.